Hello and thank you for returning to the channel. I'm just going to do a quick video here on the Baltimore tunnel disaster that occurred in 1919. So I'll start by mentioning this is Spring Street in Wilkes-Barre. It's the Home Depot. Where it occurred was in the back right of the Home Depot. There's a tunnel entrance that went in. Went straight back that way. This was the Delaware and Hudson operation. Very, very big operation. But right here it says, near here on June 5, 1919, explosion, fire in the Baltimore mine tunnel, killed 92 and injured 60 when a fallen trolley wire contacted a cart carrying miners and kegs of blasting powder. One of the deadliest industrial disasters in Pennsylvania history. It attracted international media and organized labor attention. The resulting U.S. Bureau of Mines investigation led to the prohibition of transporting miners and explosives in the same rail car. This was put up in 2013 or 2014. It does say 2014, so I'll go off that. But starting in 2004, I started lobbying for a sign to be placed right here in King's College. Luckily saw one of my letters to the editor and made it happen. So I'm just going to talk about the disaster real quick. What occurred was, I think it was 6:45 or 7:45 in the morning roughly. I think it was 6:45. About 100 plus men went into the tunnel on one big man trip. And what a man trip is it's a electric mine motor, and in the cars behind it pulling men. And unfortunately the last car had kegs of black powder. And no one's certain as to the cause, but what occurred was possible arcing or an open flame from an oil wick or a carbide. Something sparked that black powder. It wasn't dynamite, it was black powder. It was real volatile, and it blew up, and it was such a vicious explosion that the newspapers said that people were burnt to a crisp. And it only occurred 200 feet in the tunnel. But in addition to it occurring 200 feet in the tunnel, if you were near that tunnel, most likely, at the entrance outside, you would have been blasted. The explosion shot out, it shot into the tunnel. And what happened was a lot of people were instantly set on fire. And it was such a catastrophic explosion that it sucked the air out of the mine. So a lot of people survived that initial explosion. There was the death toll was 92. There was 44 serious injuries, and only 17 people in the mine were unscathed. A lot of people were running around literally suffocating in place. So this was a main haulage. I don't know if it was a two-track tunnel drift. We talked about drifts in my mine entrances. So there was a little water trough off to the side that would have flowed water out of the mine. And what happened was these guys were on fire and they were running into the water trough. And they were getting trampled on each other. People were drowning in like 18 inches of water, a foot and a half, 2 feet of water. They were drowning because they were being trampled to death. Literally people from the newspaper, again, this is not me trying to be ghoulish, but these people are literally burnt in place to a crisp. They were like cremated according to the news articles. The news articles back then were absolutely horrible. So again, it happened back there to the right, back right, northeast section of the Home Depot. And up until a few years ago, you could see a culvert that was to the right of the main portal. And in old historical photos, you can clearly see that culvert that ran under the railroad tracks, because there's railroad tracks on top of the tunnel. But what was really terrible about this disaster was the day before, these gentlemen were welcoming home their sons from World War I. So at like 6, 7 p.m. the night before, 12 hours before, the newspapers are talking about, Wilkes-Barre, the East End section here, was very joyous because the troops were coming home. And the next day, those same troops were burying their fathers and friends. But some miners said they saw an overhead trolley wire that was broke, touched the black powder. Some people within the Delaware and Hudson Coal Company, because it was Hudson Coal Company mine, said it was the miners. Of course, the companies, especially back then, are going to blame the miners, saying someone had an oil wick lamp or a carbide. So they kind of found no one at fault per se. Everyone was wrong. But yeah, having 100+ guys ride in with explosives that weren't protected, in addition to being on the mantrip car, which they shouldn't have been, they were unprotected. There was like 12 powder kegs, and they were literally kegs of black powder. And they said men would barter with one another because sometimes people would forget powder. This is the coal company said. People would forget powder. So they would like do these transactions where they would, you know, borrow powder because they had to pay for their own powder back then. They would, you know, make transactions together, and they probably had their oil wicks on, and that detonated. But a lot of people seem to be of the thinking, and this official memorial marker says when a fallen trolley wire contacted cart, and then set off the blast. But it was something. Like, it literally, the survivors said people were running out of the mine on fire, and civilians were out and about. And you know, the homes here, you can see how close the neighborhoods are here. These are old coal company homes. These are actual coal company homes that would have, this house would have been there, these homes. So this was a huge catastrophic explosion. So they went in and they were pulling survivors out. And as they're pulling survivors out, these guys were still on fire. They were still on fire. And they said the most like hardened of hearts were like left weeping, because it was just a true heart. I couldn't imagine coming back from World War I and you survive the trenches and you come home and you're here in Wilkes-Barre and you're seeing people running out of tunnels on fire. It's just horrible. And there was a lot of heroism there. A lot of the injured that were severely burnt themselves were pulling out their comrades. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that survived the explosion, they were pulling their friends' corpses out. It was just absolutely tragic. They said just bodies congregated primarily around the mantrip car. So God bless all 92 men, the 44 injured, and all the poor people who had to witness that, and all the widows and orphans. Very sad. I'm glad. I don't want to take credit for this because I did not raise the funds. But in 2004, like I said, I started writing a letter to the editor campaign on the anniversary of this. And I remember speaking to a woman who was in her late 80s at the time when this memorial got placed, and she was so happy because her great uncle, I believe it was, died in this disaster, and she thanked me. Nice person. But thank you so much to King's College for having their history department research this and raise the $5,000+ required to get this placed here. So it's good, and there's always a little bit of flowers here. And that church is a really neat Catholic church. Undoubtedly some of the victims would have been buried out of there. My grandfather and father attended that church. And it's real eerie, but that tunnel's still there undoubtedly, with just some backfill in front of it. The history is real. It's there if you want to find it. Thank you for watching us, and have a good day.